Good evening. My name is Linda Bell, and it's my honor as Provost to welcome you all to the final lecture in Barnard's Big Problems Making Sense of 2020 series. This lecture series is a new component of our first year experience program designed especially for the class of 2024. So welcome to all of our first year students. First year experience introduces our incoming class to the intellectual life of the college in small seminar group settings, equips them with critical reading, discussion, and writing skills that cross disciplinary boundaries, and provides them with strong foundations for a successful academic career. Today's lecture marks the third and final installment of this fall's series. The academic year started this September on the heels of a turbulent summer characterized not only by the pandemic's pervasive and devastating effects, but also by a tide of voices rising against systemic and violent racism in our country. And this evening, we find ourselves nearly a month away from the end of a semester like no other. Our community was faced with the challenge of reinforcing our bond to one another despite distance and isolation. We met that challenge with a commitment to engage with and bear witness to the continued effects of COVID-19, the loss and uncertainty it has caused, as well as the inequities it revealed to be entrenched in our healthcare system and in our nation. It is a commitment to the critical thinking inherent to a Barnard education, as well as to the care and support fundamental to our community. Much still lies ahead, with 2020 drawing to a close and the presidential election behind us. The new year presents a mix of opportunities, questions, and for sure a continued need for accountability. This course and its accompanying lecture series were intentionally designed to challenge our students and the greater Barnard community to actively and critically engage with the ongoing moment and to help us grapple with urgent questions. The following questions continue to guide our thinking in the Big Problem series and are worth repeating for us all this evening. First, what does this moment reveal about existing power structures, value systems, and the institutions that produce and replicate them? Second, what forms of destabilization might we actually welcome as part of a long history of anti-racist and feminist activism? Third, how do we care for and center communities who experience the pain and injustices of this moment most directly? And fourth and finally, what might our world ideally look like as we move forward? Tonight, we ask our community to join us in continuing to examine 2020 through these multiple lenses. Our lecture this evening will be followed by a question and answer session in which our speaker will answer questions submitted by our Barnard first year students who've engaged with some of her written and her recorded work. I pause once again to take this opportunity to thank the faculty directors of first year writing and first year seminar who have worked so hard with our students to structure this series. Professors Pam Cobrin, Wendy Schorheim, Lori Postlewaite, and Cecilia Lee Spond. I am now extraordinarily pleased to introduce our speaker for this evening, Roberta Schwartz. Roberta is a Barnard alumna and a part of the class of 1991. She earned her master's degree from Johns Hopkins and her PhD from the Utah School of Public Health. In her current role as Chief Innovation Officer of Houston Methodist Hospital, Schwartz is responsible for advancing and expanding Houston Methodist's digital innovation platforms, including telemedicine, artificial intelligence, and big data. Prior to joining Houston Methodist, which was named by US News and World Report as the #1 hospital in Texas for 7 straight years, she worked at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York as their director of business and has operated as a consultant and a business manager in academic medical centers through AMP-CSC, as well as for the government at CMS. Roberta is involved in several nonprofit organizations and has won many awards for her professional and nonprofit work, including the National Jill Ireland Award for Volunteerism, Houston Hadassah's Woman of Courage Award, Houston's Women on the Move Award, Yo Play Champions Award for 2008, Houston Top 50 Women in 2009, ABC Channel 13 Women of Distinction for 2015. And she was inducted into the Greater Houston Women's Hall of Fame in 2016 and has received the 2019 ACHE Healthcare Executive Regents Award. Roberta Schwartz, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you with us this evening, and welcome back to Barnard virtually.
It is such a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. A few of you in the first year class I know personally, and am thrilled that you all chose Barnard for your education. I do view my time at Barnard as such a special experience, but more importantly, I think that education that you're gaining at Barnard is so amazing, as it teaches you that women can do anything that you want to do, and there's no stopping us. So at the heels of lots of things that are happening federally right now, I come to you as a very proud alumni and am thrilled to share with you my knowledge tonight. And hopefully my screen now is there, and let's see. Okay. So what I'm going to do is spend a little bit of time walking you through kind of COVID, what has happened, why we are where we are today, where I think we're going, and then flip on a little bit to innovations. I get the honor of holding really 3 roles at Houston Methodist. I sit over our academic campus. It's about 1,000 beds here, about 7,500 employees. And then the second one is our Chief Innovation Officer, really furthering digital technologies. And then the third one is really sitting as the COVID incident commander, and in the longest incident command in my history here. I've been here now 20 years, starting in Tropical Storm Allison, which most of you will never have heard of, but actually had a big impact on the city of Houston, and gone through many, many hurricanes and disasters. Hurricane Harvey was a very long one here in Houston, and despite that, COVID Incident Command beats all of those by about 900% of the time. So this is a relatively long Incident Command, and I'll kind of go into what that looks like. So let's begin. 2020, obviously, in healthcare is a year that none of us will forget. It is a pivotal year in the history of healthcare. So many things have happened, and so many things have changed. And in our industry, I will tell you, I think there are many things where we won't be going backwards and changing. But the question is, when did this all begin, and when did it all start here in the United States? There's a lot of debate about when the first COVID cases really hit the US border. You'll have a lot of people argue that it started really more in November or December, but really when you started to see it hit the mainstream is towards the middle and end of February. This is one of the articles from the front page of the New York Times on February 24th. About this date, I turned to my husband and I said, look, I need to go shopping. I need to stock up the house because I don't think you're going to see me for a little while. And indeed, that was indeed the case. On March 1st, we went into Incident Command, and it really didn't come home much for the first couple of months until we got settled. And the question is, why? You know, why is COVID a big deal? For God's sakes, I was just reading this lovely article you'll enjoy. It's fun facts and questions, trivia. And the question is, how did we get here? Well, I'd like to read you. This is always fun. Here are the conspiracy theories. We got here because of 5G technology, genetically modified crops, not eating enough meat makes you immune, and COVID-19 is part of a big plot to make sure that Bill Gates can vaccinate the world. So aside from conspiracy theory, you get to any new type of virus, Usually, I will tell you, there is a crossover from some type of animal into the human specter. And indeed, that's really what happened with this novel coronavirus. It was interesting because I will tell you, coronaviruses are routine. And in fact, one of the hard parts we had here at the hospital is we diagnosed coronaviruses all the time. And so when we would diagnose one of our normal coronaviruses, people were freaking out and isolating the room. And we had to use language to separate a normal coronavirus from COVID, which is a novel coronavirus, a new type of coronavirus. And so that's why you saw that language move away from coronavirus to COVID, because people wanted to separate it from coronaviruses that we have all the time, that our bodies know how to fight, from this new one. So there was a lot of question at the beginning of why not just let this run its course? Like, what was the problem? And you can see here, I've plotted for you on the bottom, the fatality score is going up the one side, and the number of people impacted in the spreading, the quickness of the spreading, is going to the right. So if you look, this novel coronavirus really at the least kind of started at the flu, but in its deadliness went up to kind of the SARS viruses, and the spreading is much faster and much quicker than the seasonal flu. So as opposed to measles, which is ridiculously fast spreading, but really not quite as deadly to most age groups, this actually was much more deadly, particularly to certain groups of people, and it was a new virus. I'm having some trouble. There we go. So why is it a big deal? Because it's highly contagious. It's new. No one has immunity. It causes infections and can spread the infections in asymptomatic people. And it kind of latches on in the lung. And for those people that it really latches onto in the lung and goes down, it's sometimes hard to recover from. So at the beginning of this all, we had these discussions. What was this going to look like? Was it going to be one big peak and then a lot of little peaks? Or was it going to be lots of little peaks all over the place? Or, a lot of little ones? What was going to happen and where was it? You can see 3 different peaks. These are from 3 different types of flu season. The Spanish influenza, that was actually the influenza that caused my hospital to be created here in Houston. You can see a big flu season in 1957, 1958, and then 2009 to 2010. I know there were a lot of debates in the presidential about this H1N1, and that was basically, you can see the curve from that as well. But the question on what it was going to look like, we really weren't sure. So here are the curves that we talk about here. You can see the EU curve and you can see the US curve. And you can see the US curve, there was one kind of big hill in March and April, and then another one in the summer. And I will tell you that March and April, the curves were much heavier in the Northeast and in the Pacific Northwest. Those were the first 2 that really kind of got caught. The rest of the United States at that point locked down. So that would have been a much larger curve if that hadn't locked down. When it finally calms down in New York, sort of towards the summer, the rest of the country blew up. So as they calmed down in the Northeast, you saw this blow up everywhere else in the country. And we all kind of came to the other side, and now we're seeing that surge, which was always the concern of a fall season and what would happen. So really the question is it equal? Does this disease really kill equal groups of people? And you can see that no, it differs by age group. That's kind of one grouping that it differs by. It also differs by viral load. So the question is, why do some people come in? I have entire families where they are all in the ICU and they end up on ECMO, and some of them end up dying because they have this very, very high viral load. And I have other people that can walk around with COVID and not even be impacted or even know that they have it. Because again, they have a much lower viral load. And some people pass it on as super spreaders, and some people don't pass it on at all. There's a lot of questions that we have, and with a novel virus, That's a key question. So one key thing, and this actually was a study that was done that really looked at all of the different moments in time and how the treatments have changed, right? One of the problems with a novel virus is that we don't have a lot of treatments. I don't have Theraflu. I don't have an antibiotic. So we've had to do a lot of changing for the ways that we basically have treated this illness and treated this disease. And you can see a lot of these drugs, and you can see the one that's probably the most controversial in the United States, and that's hydrochloroquine. And while everyone was kind of pressuring to get more hydrochloroquine, there were a lot of studies really showing that it wasn't particularly effective. Now, I can tell you that it may be effective at certain moments in time, 48 hours after you're diagnosed, but there hasn't been as much study of various points in time. And despite the fact that there aren't many studies about it, I can tell you I just threw out yet another letter from a politician, and a high-ranking politician, that I needed to encourage the federal government to pay for hydrochloroquine. So there's been a lot of, we've worked on this coronavirus in terms a little more on hearsay, and sometimes it's hard to get that science through. And that's a little bit of what you're seeing pressuring a new White House, is really bringing back a lot more scientists into this fold and having them take a front seat rather than a back seat in terms of this pandemic. So I think you got to introduce a little bit to Houston Methodist, but because I'm using this as a change slide, because I'm going to now show you some of our data here to kind of make this very real. So you can see our system is 7 hospitals, one of which is an academic hospital, that's mine. We have over 2,300 beds, so we are a big system in the city of Houston. We have over 25,000 employees. So, and obviously heard at the beginning, a very well-recognized hospital, and I am very proud to be here. So we mounted our response, as I told you, right around March 1st. And when you go into incident command, each incident command that I've been in and or run look a little bit different. Incident command is the moment in time where your traditional structures stop being in charge and someone is named the incident commander, and that incident commander has the final say. All information rolls up to an incident commander from all of the different called section chiefs. So a section chief of infectious disease and a section chief of beds and supply chain, and they would basically take over basically the running of the organization during a disaster, because nothing functions in a normal manner during a disaster. So these are the types of things that we do in an incident command, and I know that these were some of the questions that you have. These are not the only activities, but this is how incident command is run. And you know, one of the things that's kind of, I'm going to come to right at the beginning and come back to at the end, is one of the primary purposes of COVID and the incident command structure is to deal with the people and the people aspects and labor pools and the changes and gathering of volunteers and the way things are. So this is some of the photos from our beginning of our incident command. And believe it or not, despite the fact that the way I look today, I am the woman top third from the left of my screen. You can probably tell what I look like. I always joke that in incident command, when we're in the throes of it, which we may go back to starting this coming weekend, my hair is always up and I'm always pretty much in scrubs. So I tend to look a little different to kind of demark when we're in full-on incident command. And these were our curves. As I said, we locked down pretty quickly after New York went pretty much out of control. But then as our governor opened up and refused masking orders, and those actually made it almost illegal to have required masking orders in the various counties, we went out of control. So you can see as it opened back up, this was our second surge. Now, while our numbers have read about 175, this is about 5 days old, and I am now at 230. So the curve ticked up actually starting 2 days ago, and ticked straight back up. And I look like I'm on an equal trajectory if it continues to where we were in that June surge, which is very depressing for me. So I'm hoping it'll turn around, but we'll have to take a thing. If it doesn't, we'll be back in full on incident command 7/24 in a few more days. So let's talk about prevention measures. And I know there are a lot of questions on vaccine and when can I get back to my normal life. Obviously, we have one clear prevention measure right now, and that's masks. And the CDC did come out with an additional study today showing that 2-ply masks are incredibly effective, and even down to the 10 microns. So I think you're going to see a national masking order as soon the day that Biden takes office, and if he can help it during the transition period. But certainly the day he takes office, I think there'll be a federal mandate of masks. And this is obviously my fun slide, basically talking about whether or not people have rights. And my true belief on a public health is that this is a no questions asked. We must have a national masking mandate at this point in time, and it's way overdue. The second part that we have is a prevention measure is this distancing, and I hate the word social distancing. Actually, I like the word physical distancing because it should not be social; it should be physical. And it shows that actually this is a great slide to show basically how many people you can stop from spreading if you do the physical distancing. So it really does have a level of importance. Now, I will tell you one of the issues that we've got with this physical distancing is that people are tired of it and they don't want to do physical distancing anymore. And so there's a lot of work that goes on with cell phones and how close people are to each other to actually do some studies. And you'll see that we are actually not doing as well as we should, and we need to get back to that level of diligence to see this prevention. And this is actually shows you a little bit about where the close contacts are and why you see people pushing back against kind of restaurants and gyms and other areas where you have this close unmasked type of contact. And people are very disappointed in our hospital that we closed the gym for our employees, but we really felt like we couldn't physically and distance, mask up, and make sure that everything was cleaned in a way that we felt comfortable. And so we did not open those gyms. So there's a lot of people who feel like we should just be letting this go and have herd immunity. And this slide will show you that basically if we did that and if we just let this run its course, there would be a lot more people that would die. And I think that the price that we would have to pay is just too high. So we do ask everyone to bear with us, especially with the good news coming out about vaccines. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So here we are on vaccines. Okay, so I've talked about prevention and what we can do, and now we've got vaccine progress. So you will know that there are two that are the lead in the United States. They are Moderna and they are Pfizer. Pfizer gave their interim analysis yesterday and basically said that in the interim analysis that their vaccine is 90% effective. Now, the good news about that is that, yay, like 90% effective is far higher than we needed to roll it out in the United States. A flu vaccine is a little over 50% effective, so this is super exciting. Now, it's an interim analysis. We need to get the final analysis, which will take probably, my guess is about another month. The virus going out of control is good news for vaccines. Moderna is another one. We're waiting for their interim and final. They actually began enrolling before Pfizer, so we're waiting on Moderna. Both of those actually have their production already ready. We pre-bought vaccine. Now, there's only enough for so many people, both in the United States and worldwide, so we need all of these manufacturers to come out with their vaccines in order to go back to normal. And we think it really will take till middle to almost end of 2021 before we are out there. But you can see we are expecting, like I'm expecting at the hospital for our healthcare workers, I'm expecting my first shipments. My guess is in January. maybe for Christmas, but I'm guessing in January for our frontline workers. So obviously yesterday was really good news on Pfizer. AstraZeneca in the Europe is doing their trials in Europe and in South America, so we're waiting on those. The one death in Brazil was actually in the placebo group, so that's not a big deal. Again, I'm very hopeful and waiting on Moderna. A whole separate lecture can be on delivery of these vaccines, but that's what we're dealing with. So again, 2020, as you've done your lectures, wasn't just a tough year because of COVID, right? It wasn't a difficult year for that purpose. There's a lot of things that were happening in 2020 that kind of made this difficult year. And one of the things I do want to point out that kind of goes back to my 2020 as a year we'll never forget is if you ask me things that keep me up at night, it's the fact that many, many people are too scared of healthcare to come back into the healthcare setting to take care of their normal problems. So there's a good chance that I will be dealing with people who have delayed diagnosis of a cancer or delayed treatment or delaying their treatment for heart disease or getting their prescriptions refilled, which they needed to do because they're scared of a healthcare system because we are labeled with COVID, right? It is not the only thing we do. And there's a reason that healthcare is an essential service, and that's because people need us. So in this year of 2020, I think we're going to be paying for the 2020 year for a very long time when it comes to healthcare because of the impacts of the way we've had to operate in 2020 and where we're operating. So this just gives you a small snapshot, and again, a whole separate discussion on avoidance of preventive care and what the impact we believe is going to be. This one happens to be on cancers. So you can see people basically delaying their diagnosis of these illnesses. So I'm going to flip because, I only get really another 10 or 15 minutes to speak to you, as there were some great questions that came through, and hopefully I've answered a number of those through the beginning part of my talk. But I do want to also talk about healthcare and survival in healthcare. It's obviously financially been a very difficult year for all of us in healthcare. And we've really struggled to kind of come forward and deal with both COVID and, as you saw, deal with other healthcare problems. But there are some things that have thrived, and where there is challenges, there are also opportunities. And we've seen some of that. And me in particular, flipping to the other side of my hat, I've really seen these opportunities in the adaption and adoption, both in technology and healthcare. And again, I could not have made up these numbers. So focusing on what we've done at Houston Methodist, because it's a good example of what's happening around the country, and I tangibly know it better than I know other things. We began almost 2 years ago on a journey to disrupt ourselves, that we could do a better job in disruption than having someone from outside, kind of these new startups, disrupt healthcare in a different way. So we really began down a road of focusing on technology and focusing on innovation. And I have had the pleasure of leading our innovation center. But really, when you look at some of the winners of COVID, there was this great cartoon. I'm sorry didn't put it in. It said, which is the most responsible for adoption of technology? Number one, your CEO. Number two, your chief information officer. Or number three, COVID. And I would say to you, it had a big check mark by the COVID box, because that's probably the one that is the most. And there's nowhere where that's been more true than in virtual care, in telemedicine, right? Both in the direct-to-consumer markets, kind of taking medicine directly to the consumers, and in the hospital, in things like virtual ICU and virtual stroke and other areas of hospital-to-hospital kind of conversations or telemedicine that needs to happen. So we began this journey This will give you one curve, a really amazing curve, and I'll show you one other picture. We began before COVID, even after I told you, all of the pieces were in place. We were disrupting ourselves. We were like, we had every platform, we had every bit of advertising, and we still were less than 5% virtual medicine. And when COVID struck and people couldn't come to the clinic, we only had a few doctors using it routinely. Suddenly, we trained over 900 doctors on how to use telemedicine in the drop of a hat, right? It's kind of like your education. Your professors didn't really like virtual learning before. Now they love it. It's kind of one of those things where they don't love it, but they're dealing with it. So as we look from this 5%, we went up to almost 80% telemedicine. Well, it caused our doctors to basically say, wow, that actually works. And it caused our patients to say, wow, I really like that. And now what I thought would take me almost 5 years to get to the level we are, we're over 30% telemedicine on a routine basis, which is fundamentally changing the industry. This is a picture of our virtual ICU. Those cameras you see in the top upper left are basically can look down and see the pore, like a small little tiny dot on a person's body. They can read medicines, they can read what's happening, and they can do medicine virtually. And we really did need it during the surge, and we will be using it, my guess is once again in a few weeks here. But we use it every night regardless. This is kind of how we nightly operate now. And the iPads to the bottom left, when we had to put up things fairly quickly, we used iPads because we didn't have cameras in all of our ICU rooms, just at the main campus when we started. Now they're in all of our rooms. You can see telemedicine within the hospital environment has been huge. It's been huge. It's just amazing how quickly it's been adopted. This to give you an idea of where our future is in telemedicine. These are little add-ons to your iPhone. They kind of hook on. It does a heart, lung. It does look in your ears, look in your throat. That little middle piece down below is a stethoscope that is quite amazing. It's equal to a physician giving a full exam. We also used care pathways and really focused on getting information to people in a text-based format. We used robotic intelligence, robotic process automation. We needed that to actually get menial functions off our human plate and move them into that environment. We put iPads in all the rooms. We had them in some rooms. Now we're working on getting them in all rooms for entertainment, for connectivity, to order food. We needed to expand all of the capabilities within our rooms, and this has been so successful. We'd put chat bots on our phones to help us and expand that technology. And we did what's called symptom checkers, allowed you to just interact with a computer to really check things on the phone about how your symptoms were and was it likely COVID. So we used a lot of different technology. We're beginning to use at the nascent of COVID, but now getting more mature, is voice technology and utilization of voice technology to talk rather than touch. We're trying to move to a touchless environment so that healthcare basically doesn't need as many people touching it. And we're working with Amazon and Alexa devices and all kinds of other areas. I do want to point out that there's tons of technology, and I could go on for pages and pages and pages of different technology that has utilization in the healthcare environment. And we were making huge progress before, and that progress has only soared now to a whole new level. But in addition to that, I will tell you that we celebrate failures. Sometimes if you're not pushing things far enough, then you're not moving as quickly as you want to. And this is a great quote from Winston Churchill, which is that failure is not fatal. And that's something you should remember in your life and your career and in everything that you do in finding good places. As I complete here and really finish up my talk, I do want, when people ask me what is both the most challenging things about COVID, the most rewarding, and the thing that as a leader you need to spend the most amount of time on, it's your people. Your people are kind of at the center of what you do, and this has been very difficult. There's been a lot of breakdowns and a lot of stress, and there's nowhere where there's probably more stress than in the healthcare environment, where people are very nervous about everything that they do each day. And I know that there's no doubt you hear about this because I get the Barnard newsletters, and obviously your president is well versed in this. But really concentrating on your people is really the key thing to kind of keeping a healthy environment. And as we look at this, we all talk about the fact that while there are many curves and waves that will happen within the healthcare environment during COVID, the most important waves, the one that no one is talking about or not enough people are talking about, which is the underlying psychiatric trauma and mental illness and economic and burnout that's really going to happen for years and years after this stops and we do get a vaccine. And we need to recognize that. And certainly you, within what you're studying and after you graduate, will be facing this without a doubt in spades. I'll close here and just talk about the fact that I am insanely proud of not only our organization, but of my industry, of everything that we have done. I can tell you that there's no doubt healthcare workers have lost their lives treating patients with COVID as it has been passed on, and not all of them were able to survive. That being said, I look at them every day and I'm so proud of everything they've accomplished. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the questions. And I, again, am so honored to have been invited to speak to you today.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you very much for that. And let me just say that a big thank you to you as a member of the medical community for all you have done over these many months. We are really, truly in your debt. And thank you for finding the time, despite all that incredibly busy schedule, to be with us this evening. We really do appreciate it. So there's a number of questions from students. I'm going to start with your Chief Innovation Officer at a major hospital in the center of a city which has seen quite a large impact of COVID. The question is, what does the future of telehealth look like post-COVID? You touched on this a little bit, but this student is also interested in insurance pushback. And you mentioned a few devices which are quite expensive. How does it all work with health insurance to kind of mitigate against? Are those changes permanent? Are they going to impact people for a long time? How do we pay for it? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah, so I would tell you that every insurer that I've spoken to and had the honor of talking to on this topic will tell you that it's not possible to put telemedicine back in a box at this point. They can't have it and take it away. So that those days are gone. It's out of the box. The genie's out, and it's not going back. Now, that being said, what they are worried about is runaway costs from telemedicine. And they have a right to be worried that it's easy and it's simple. Now, what they're looking at is how to bundle so that if you have a telemedicine visit today, you don't get paid for an in-person visit tomorrow. So they're really trying to wrap their arms around telemedicine as a future. But I can tell you from all of us within the industry, there's a lot of hope that it will save money to the system and not cost money.
Thank you. So just to follow up a little bit further, in one of our speakers in this series spoke about what she called kind of a little bit difficult structural outcomes by race in healthcare. So the question is, do you think that some of the technologies you've helped to develop at Houston Methodist Hospital could be implemented to combat this kind of racism in healthcare?
So let me take this from a couple of different angles. So actually what you're seeing in this era of telemedicine is an increased access, right? lots of people can access healthcare in a different way than they ever did before, and it's a little bit equalizing. Now, where it's not equalizing, actually, as opposed to race, is among urban and rural environments. Because actually in the rural environments, you have less of the internet and ease of streaming environments than you have in the urban environment. So actually, interestingly, playing out along different lines than I think it did before. So that's definitely one where people are talking about how to get the pipes through to make sure that people do have the access that way. So that's a little bit different. Now, where we talk about racial bias is in areas of what I would say are predictive analytics. And there's a worry that in what we call artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, that there are inherent racial biases or other biases, age biases, or gender biases, or other biases that are built into the technology. And I think that it is really essential that we work hard as we look at these new algorithms that come out. So an example of an AI algorithm that people are working on is, can I tell you, based on the information in your medical record, can I tell you that you're going to have a heart attack tomorrow? Not that you had a heart attack yesterday, but can I creep you out and tell you what's about to happen rather than what just happened? Those algorithms do have the potential of bias in them. And I think that's what our industry really has to work to make sure that we don't, in the computer algorithms, build in those biases.
Thank you. So as you think about the potential innovations and some of the ones that you might be working on, what are you most excited and hopeful about that lies in the future?
Yeah, I think that certainly artificial intelligence, without a doubt, has the most potential over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I think, there's so much to be layered on top. I think what I'm most excited about is those technologies that are in that kind of KISS principle, the keep it simple, stupid principle. And those are little itty bitty ones. Like in our care pathways, when we put in our care pathways, we've started texting you before you come to the hospital and after you leave. And what we found is by sticking in simple texts to remind you during the day of the things you should be doing or things you should be telling us, we've reduced our length of stay, we've reduced our readmissions by 50%, and we've increased our patient satisfaction. So I get very excited about very simple, stupid little things that I go, why didn't I think of that? That really work incredibly well. So I think that those are the ones that in our short term have the most promise of changing the way we work.
Thank you. So one of the articles that students had the opportunity to see was what you had written about Hurricane Harvey. And so the question is, did your experience or the hospital's experience with Hurricane Harvey and other natural disasters affect the way Houston Methodist has dealt with the COVID crisis? And if so, how?
In Houston, in this instance, one could call us lucky that we do disasters a lot. I'm not sure I'd call it lucky, but being in a hurricane district, we are in and out of incident command at least once a year. And we had an embedded author named Sherry Fink, who, if you all have not read her work in the New York Times, she's phenomenal, wrote a great book called 5 Days at Memorial. She's spectacular. And her comment to us when she was down with us was, the people who do disasters often are better at doing disasters. So it's kind of like if you practice it over and over and over again, you're just better at it. And I think that's indeed true here. Incident command for us is second nature. All of us know what to do. We flip in, we open the command center, we know how to turn on, which section chiefs to pull in, how to do it, how to communicate. We have our pattern and our routine way of doing it. And we just flipped into that when it came to COVID. So yes, indeed, things like Hurricane Harvey or EMR downtimes or going live with big systems or losing your data center or all kinds of things that I've done incident command for make you very good at doing it. And we practice it at least once, if not twice a year.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about politics, if we could. I have a question from a student, and I'm going to read it verbatim, and you can comment on, we could take the sentence and decompose it if we want, and you could comment on both parts. But the question reads, do you think the previous administration's undermining of science will leave lasting impacts over the next 4 years that may be difficult to bridge and mend and heal?
I can tell you there were many times during this um, period where I have been very frustrated by the fact that there has been misinformation presented to the public and things that I found very unnecessary. Because I always say, you know, if it's cheap and it's free and it's easy, let's just do it. And that's one where it was hard. It was very hard. It's a great article for those of you who want to read it on that dissected what's happened to the CDC and whether or not the CDC can recover from this period and come back from the depths where it was. And I can't believe I'm having that discussion. Like, I cannot believe that I am having a conversation about whether or not the CDC or the WHO are valuable organizations to us on a public health level. And I don't think they were necessary. So I think that science has to inform us. And I'm not telling you that a scientist would make the best incident commander in the world. I'm an operator. I am a very good operator. I work with amazing scientists. They don't want my job and I don't want their job, right? We work hand in hand to operationalize the science, right? That's how we work. Now, I do think that the new administration already has put together a very nice team. I think that many of the Trump people that were in office are amazing folks. Dr. Fauci is, you know, put up a statue. He's amazing. But I do think that we need to let the science inform the way we deal with this pandemic. And too often we were chasing our tails, not listening to what the scientists were telling us. And yes, they learned a lot and they changed a lot and they gave us new information because, again, it's a novel disease. So you can't expect them to know everything on day one. And it's easy to have hindsight, but it's not easy always to look out in the future and know exactly what to do. So I am disappointed. And I'm not telling you what your politics should be. What I am telling you is that I am disappointed that we were not able to do more on a public health level through the last number of months, and that sometimes we came at this a little bit later than we should. But I think that with as we move into the future, I think we need to put public health a little more center. I do want to give kudos and credit. I think that the Trump administration and everything that he did invest early and hard in vaccines and other areas that will pay off in dividends. They are pre-ordered and pre-made so that once they're approved, I think they'll go out to the public. So does that help dissect a few comments on both sides? There's a lot of things on both sides to be said.
Is there any other example anywhere in the history of medicine or healthcare or public health in which sort of science and medicine has been so politicized? Can you think of any?
Well, I think I can tell you that there's a moment where I'd go back to and in really thinking about polio. And as we go into polio, you know, that was one of the things when they really did find the gene and they found the cure for polio. The person who found it just handed it to the public and said, "This belongs to the public. You know, this is for the good of human being and the good of man." And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. I think medicine is often politicized. Sadly, there's a lot of things held up on both sides of the fence because medicine is an art as much as it is a science. So I think we will always be in a slightly political position and looked at through particular lenses. And I'm not saying people's lenses are right or wrong, but they're different lenses. But when the answer is very clear scientifically, I think we do need to follow that answer.
So a few students have asked questions about the vaccine, which you covered, and also about the rationing of care, should there be a spike. So can you talk a little bit about how we would distribute vaccine or ration the vaccine initially? And have you thought at all about that? And also just the whole issue of care. What do we do if hospitals are full? How do we think of that question?
Yeah, to think that we don't have to ration care is foolish. We do it every day. It happens, happens sometimes by insurance. It happens sometimes by geographic location, population centers, where we're building our hospitals, where we're building our doctor's offices, how hard or easy is it to get to places. So we ration care today. I actually remember, I will never forget, for me, and I know some of the questions were about my career, I feel lucky enough that this was always, I knew always that I wanted to do this since I was very young, and have grown up. And so I was able to tailor some of my Barnard classes around being able to learn about these issues. And one of them was the ethics of healthcare. And there was a book by Daniel Callahan in one of my sociology classes. I can still remember it. And it basically said at 80, we should stop giving care. Anybody who's above the age of 80, that's it, they're done. And that was how we should ration care. And I thought, oh my God, it was so shocking, but he had some points, and there was some truth to those interesting arguments. Now, the question really becomes about when healthcare is enough. I think in this pandemic, actually, we're doing a phenomenal job of making sure, and the government has done a great job of making sure that everyone is covered to some level, and the initial evidence of COVID is actually being paid for. What we're not talking about is that for some people, the effects of COVID are lasting for a very long time, and it's only the initial impact, like it's only the initial admission that is being covered. So the mental health issue that they have a year from now, or the heart attack that's going to ensue because their heart was made weakened by this illness, we're not talking about how that's going to be covered. Now, I do think that hospitals are surging to meet the demands, and that on the ground in an incident command structure, we are making line decisions about who gets the care and who doesn't get the care. And I will tell you, hospitals are being very generous, sharing with each other and helping each other to do the best that we can to get the most amount of people treated. But when it comes to things like, rationed drugs or vaccines, there is going to have to be a first, second, and third. On the other side, I will tell you, we have a whole group of people, 33% of the country, who are saying, I don't want to get it. What am I supposed to do about 33% of the people who say, I don't want to? And are we going to allow that to happen? So, I think that these issues of ethics within healthcare are very complicated. And we deal with them here kind of in my hospital operational role. We deal with those every day, all the time. Families who want to keep people alive long after we know it's futile, to people who say, I don't want to seek care because I'm too afraid to seek care. So I think there's always a balance. Actually, COVID's done a pretty good job of equalizing that. I wish we could almost do that every day.
In your podcast interview with Houston Innovators, you mentioned your collaboration with digital innovation obsessed people, I think you said. So this student is asking, where do you draw inspiration for all your ideas?
So there's no doubt. It always happens. Immediately after we leave this, I'm going to get 5 phone calls and 6 texts with different ideas. And I can tell you our entire steering committee basically has that. The ideas come from everywhere. Here is I just was on a business trip, my first one since January. These are the articles I pulled out. that I need to discuss with people because there are so many great ideas that are in everything that I read and everything that I do. Me going to a supermarket and watching a new technology looks at how we can adopt it within healthcare. So I think one of the amazing part is if you wake up, smell, smell the roses and kind of see the happiness and the inspiration in every day, you'll pick up ideas everywhere for the type of work that you want to do.
Okay, great. One last quick question. How do you think your education at Barnard has prepared you for this dealing with the kind of crisis that you're dealing with now?
It's amazing to start this and finish it on a note about Barnard, which is really incredible. So I am third generation at Barnard/Columbia, with a lot of my family having gone there. And so when looking for my education, I know my family was thrilled when this was where I ended up. And I don't know if I knew how much I would appreciate the strength of the women around me, and how much for the rest of my life that would impact my view on both not only the foundational knowledge that I got from some incredible professors and a core curriculum that was just amazing, but more importantly, that these women have gone on to do incredible things. And when I tell you, some of them are incredible things in motherhood and in education and in art and in medicine. But I look at them, whether I'm in touch with them or not, and know that there's this cadre of women that were produced by an organization who said women can be everything and anything. And for me, that inspires me every day, and allows me to mentor women that come behind me. And knowing that all of you who are at the beginning of that education know that you can dream big and be big, because now we continue based on we stand on the shoulder of the giants before us who made our vote happen, who made us the women that we are, including people like my mother who didn't have the opportunities that I have, and now really have shown that really anything is possible. So I'm a very proud alumni. I'm a very proud mother of children, watching them go off to college, and hope for the future that they will have even a brighter future than I had.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful way to end our discussion today. Know that Barnard is very proud of you. And it's a wonderful message of hope and continuity and growth. So I thank everyone for joining us this evening. Special thanks to our speaker, Roberta Schwartz, for taking part in the Big Problems Making Sense of 2020 series. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Please stay safe and stay well. Thank you.